Frank Gruber and Lois. Hi, I'm Gary Lovisi, and this time we're going to take a look at one of my favorite pulp detective Western writers and one of my favorite writers' wives, Lois Gruber. Frank Gruber, first of all, was a very popular pulp author. He had a lot of stories published in the pulp magazines, in paperback hardcovers. He also did Hollywood scripts for TV shows, created 3 TV shows, did movies, was a writer's writer. One time it was said that he was a social drinker, but he couldn't become a alcoholic like a lot of other writers were because he was too busy, and he didn't want to have alcohol interfere with his writing because he was that much of a professional. He was a great author, always could be counted on to do terrific action, adventure, and interesting stories. He wrote some books in 14 days, and he's a terrific writer. I did not know him. He was born in 1904 and died in 1969. He was about 65 years old. So I never really had a chance to meet him. I mean, I was, at that time, I was 12, 13 years old or something. And I didn't know things about books and writers and publishing and all of that. But I read some of his books and I really liked them a lot. And I didn't know that he was responsible for so many shows. He created TV shows, 3 TV shows that I really liked. One of them was Tales of Wells Fargo, the other was The Texan, and the other one was Shotgun Slade. That I never heard of, but Tales of Wells Fargo is very popular, well known. He wrote 15 Johnny Fletcher crime mysteries, and he has a few of the signet reprints of his books. The Silver Tombstone, The Honest Dealer, and this is Johnny Fletcher was a book dealer, and he was an honest book dealer, but he was a detective too. And The Gamecock Murders, and you'll see a picture of Frank on the back cover here. That was Frank Gruber in the 1950s when these were published, early 1950s. I never met his wife, Lois. I don't have any picture of her, but I had a long correspondence with her, and we became friends, and she would write me constant letters about how much she missed Frank, because he died in 1969, and I was writing her in the late 80s, early 90s. So she must have been about 85 years old, even though I couldn't tell. I got the impression that she was very frail and aged, and she was his widow, and she was doing. I never met a wife or anybody that promoted a person's work more than Lois Gruber. She was a tireless advocate for Frank's work. She was constantly getting his work reprinted in books and all over, in fact, all over the world. And she would tell me, I just sold this book to France, and I sold this book to England, and we're having this book published. And she was telling me all these things, and here's a couple of more. So Frank wrote mysteries and crime novels, but he also wrote westerns, and here's a couple of the digest size westerns that he wrote. Broken Lance and Smoky Road. This one here is a Norman Saunders cover. That's just great. Let me see what I can give you some information, because there's a lot about Frank Gruber that should be known. So he wrote 15 Johnny Fletcher paperbacks. He was the writer on 19 TV shows, and he was a writer, or his story was used in 33 films. He had 300 plus stories published in over 40 pulp magazines. He wrote over 60 novels, and he sold over 90 million copies of his books. And he must have sold a lot more, because with Lois being his advocate, she was tireless and feisty and really, really terrific to know. And we just corresponded back and forth. And one of the books that Frank wrote that I just truly love and treasure, and I think all Pulp fans treasure this book. And this is a book that should be reread because I read it years ago, and it's like when you read it, you'll know so much. And it's The Pulp Jungle, story of writing for the pulps, and that was Frank's legacy to pulp fiction and pulp writers, and it's just a terrific, unbelievable story of what went on in the pulps and writing for the pulps. So that was a really great book to read. But the other thing is that so I would be back and forth writing to Lois, and she would be constantly telling me what she sold, and she sold this to the movies, and she sold this to this story, and all of these things to keep Frank's memory alive, which is what she wanted to do. This is over 20 years after he passed away. And then she says, I have a story that Frank wrote a detective story. It's never been published. And like right away, I says, I published Detective Story magazine. What's the story? I mean, what is it? She says, never published before. Would you like to publish it? And I says, would I like to publish it? And I says, absolutely. So we worked out a deal, and I published it in the last issue of Detective Story magazine, number 9, and it is the Phantom Model T, and this is Detective Story number 9. Also with the Bruce Timm cover. This is the last cover. This is the last issue of Detective Story magazine, and it's the first Bruce Timm cover that he did for me. And this is the Phantom Model T by Frank Gruber. And it's published and I did an appreciation of Frank Gruber, and we talked about how the story came to be. And this is a story that he had, and Bruce Timm did the illustration, of course, is for that, and he did the cover for the Phantom Model T. It's kind of almost like a Christine kind of story, and it was a great story, and it's a Frank Gruber story that had never appeared before in print, and because of Lois, and I lost touch with her over the years, and sad to say, I don't know, how she's doing or what, many years have passed by since this came out in 1990, so we're talking about more than 30 years ago. But I do treasure her and her memory, kind of person she was, wonderful lady, a real classy lady, really smart, very sharp. She was very interesting, and Frank was lucky to have a wife like her. And I kind of wish I knew Frank, but he passed away way before my time. And so I just wanted to kind of give this appreciation of Frank Gruber. Some of the things maybe you didn't know, how much he did Hollywood scripts and so many pulp magazines and books, how much 90 million copies of his books have been sold, and probably more than that. And also about how the Phantom Model T came to be, and how Lois Gruber was the kind of advocate that every author wishes he had. I mean, she must, if she was his agent, forget about it. He had the best agent in the world if she was being his agent. But being his wife, I mean, he was a very lucky man. So I just want to give this appreciation to Frank Gruber and Lois Gruber, and a great couple and a great writer. And I hope you enjoyed this look at how the Phantom Model T came to be in print for the first time ever. If you did, give us a thumbs up and a like, and thank you. We'll see you next time.